Hey everybody, and welcome to You're on Mute, a Pexip podcast. Pexip, where we do video collaboration the way it should be done. My name is Mark Okern. I am your ever-soothing detached voice, as well as the technical director and the editor of this little production. This episode's going to be a little bit different. We had a busy year on the U.S. public sector team. That meant that our usual co-host, Kyle Forney, was unable to make it for this episode. Never fear, we compensated by having an extra guest. So not only are you getting the always down-to-earth Justin Longo as your sole ringmaster this episode, you're also getting a guest duo, beginning with former ISI founder turned author Jay Myers, as well as Pexip's own Jordan Myers, who serves as our Director of Enterprise Solutions for the Midwest. You probably should take note of their last names. It might be important in just a minute. And now on with our show.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the fourth episode of You're on Mute. Today, the panel looks a little bit differently. We do not have the pleasure of having Kyle Forney on as a co-host today. If you're familiar with federal government and federal buying season, we're kind of getting down to it in terms of the government fiscal year. So Kyle's kind of a big deal on our solutions architects team here at Pexip. He got pulled into a last-minute emergency, so we won't be joining. However, we do have the pleasure of having Jay and Jordan Myers on the podcast. Jay and Jordan are a father-son duo. They've successfully ran a business. Jay was the CEO of this company for 20-plus years, eventually ended up selling the company to an industry giant, one that Pexip we do a ton of work with today. And Jordan kind of came up kind of in that business, and now we actually have the pleasure of working with Jordan here at Pexip. So the reason that we got interested in having Jay and Jordan on is because Jordan posted a LinkedIn post a couple of months back plugging Jay's podcast. So I went and gave that a listen, and they had an episode kind of about, the family dynamic in starting a business, and Jay and his wife came on and talked about, the trials and tribulations that was owning a business and, how it came to be and raising a family all through that. So we wanted to have a segment that was kind of along those lines where it would be families that are making IT their business. So our first guests are Jay and Jordan Myers. Guys, welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks for having us.
So if you guys could just give us a little bit of a background about how the business started, maybe a couple minutes on what you guys specialized in, and ultimately how you got here today.
Well, if you want me to start, Jordan, I started Interactive Solutions in 1996, literally after I'd gotten fired from this other job with a telecom company. I was an early adopter of video conferencing. Prior to starting my own business, this telecom company, I sold a lot of distance learning applications in a company called Video Telecom that became VTEL. But anyway, yeah, I got fired and got fired on my 39th birthday, so I had a lot of motivation to try to get going and do something to create a job for myself, actually, initially, and then and build it up. But Jordan's got a sister, so I had 2 kids, wife, and a hungry dog, and we had to feed all of them, so we had to kind of get going and everything. But got it off the ground, and 20 plus years later, had a lot of fun building it and growing it, and a lot of challenges, Justin. But it was I think it's an experience of a lifetime for my career, at least.
Yeah, for sure. And Jordan, kind of from your perspective, I remember when I first started at Pexip and I met you in person for the first time. Well, over video in person for the first time. It kind of all feels the same. But I remember I was like, this guy has, a lot of maturity and a lot of poise for someone who's just a couple of years older than me. And this kind of explains that. You grew up in this business, right? You've been doing this kind of your whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as my dad was starting the business, we were, a small company, and it was him and a secretary and a co-founder at that point. And so we were, hauling things in the family expedition up in Kentucky. We were, kind of a one-man band, and that was, my exposure to video conferencing. In the early days, kind of seeing it. It was something that was really cool for me, and very natural at the same time, and being able to kind of be in those, conference rooms, kind of play around the technology. It was very easy for me. So yeah, being able to kind of grow up in that and grow from that experience, and then go to fast forward to high school and even during college, I was helping as an install tech and hauling cable and, mounting TVs and things like that, to, later on, taking on a sales role and then a management role as well. So yeah, it was something that, I had the opportunity to kind of be there, throughout the whole process, and it was a really good experience.
Yeah, for sure. So what years was this? This was mid to late 90s or so?
Yeah, 96 is when we started the business, March 11th, actually, of 96. And then, almost all the way through 2018 when we sold to AVI SPL.
Wow. And, Jay, kind of something that I think holds a lot of entrepreneurs back from starting their own business is, a couple of things. One is the fear of leaving a job that they're already successful at, or in an industry that they're already successful at, where, starting your own business, everything's really on your back, right? Like your success or your failure is totally on you. And there's a certain comfort of working for somebody that people are afraid to leave. So I understand that, you got fired from your job, but what made you decide, I'm going to go out and do this on my own, as opposed to let me go out and just, find another job working for somebody else?
Yeah, Justin, what's interesting, your choice of words, because I never really felt that stability in big companies. I got out of college in the late 70s, and, the first company I worked for, I was a successful sales guy, but they ended up filing Chapter 11. And then I go to work for Eastman Kodak, had a good run with them, did some really neat stuff, top sales guy in the country, and they promote me, and then they blow up the division in 90 days when Jordan was 5 weeks old. So what you're referring to about this fear of leaving stable environments to go do something else, you know what? I told my wife when we decided to, at least that I communicated that I wanted to start the business. I needed her approval, by the way, but I was like, honey, you got to understand something. The other way didn't work. It just didn't work. When you got Chapter 11, you got a division blowing up, you get fired. It's kind of like, there's a message being sent. This is not working. And I will give my wife a lot of credit, Jordan's mother, because, it was tough. I just couldn't get in front of somebody to go do this interview thing again. I was just, burned out, or whatever you want to call it. And I remember just walking into the kitchen, and I said, yeah, man, I think I want to start my own business, and everything, and do this video stuff and all that. And I remember her looking at me, and she goes like, you know what, man, you're like one of those kind of guys. I always knew this would happen. And she just looked at me and she said, well, if we're going to do this, you need to do it now before you get much older, because I'm 39, Justin, at that point. Right. She paused, and then she turned around. She says, let's go. And that was like, charge forth. It was just a simple thing.
She need right there.
Yeah, she paused, and she kind of looked at me and she said, let's go.
Yeah, so the rest is history. From day one.
Yeah, and I would say, for your listeners out there, it's a real important issue. Starting a business, growing a business, there's so many struggles. I'm sure we'll get into some of them in this podcast and everything, but you got to have the support of your spouse, significant other, or whoever, because it's just way too hard to try to do it otherwise. You're dealing with vendors and cash flow and banks and all this stuff. And if you're coming home and, somebody's beating you over the head that you're not doing, it doesn't work. And my wife is a tough cookie. She's been through all the ups and downs. And, I wrote a book, and one of the chapters I called her, my secret weapon. She is.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you, when you're starting a business, how do you overcome a lot of those things, those limitations that you have personally, where, maybe you were an excellent salesperson, Jay, but what about all of the technical acumen that you need from software development or installation that, maybe you personally, you didn't have that on your own, or maybe you did, I don't know. But how do you kind of build the team around you to make sure that the business is successful from there?
Well, I can assure you, Jordan will tell you that I'm not the tech wizard, okay? I've gotten better, Jordan, you have to admit, over the last few years. But No, Justin, it's funny. I even early on in the business, I was fortunate enough to meet people that had a lot of influence on me. And one of the stories I've told for years and years and years, I got a chance early on. My business was probably 3 months old, and I got a chance to meet the founder of Holiday Inns. And it was like the guy created an industry. I was so jazzed up about it. We took pictures of him, and I got an award for it. Just really crazy. And he was 80-something years old at that time, but he did make a comment that I thought was really interesting. He's I'm asking him all these questions. I mean, he came in to look at a Tandberg demo, but the reality, I had some time to talk to him a little bit, and I said, "What's the secret, to building a business?" And he said, "Here's the thing." He said, "Go hire people that can do things you can't do." So I'm not the technical guy. I found the technical guy. And in fact, the original technical guy was my partner, and we unfortunately had to kind of part ways. But the guy that came in right after him is a rock star. I'd like to take credit for Interactive Solutions, but a guy named Derek Plummer, the engineer he made all the magic happen. I mean, the guy, to this day, I mean, it would never have happened without him.
Engineering, certainly in this industry, makes the world go round.
He created our brand, Justin, really. I mean, Jordan will tell you that. He created a brand. He was a perfectionist, and sometimes it drove all of us crazy. But, at the end of the day, I mean, Kimmons Wilson was the guy's name, the founder of Holiday Inns. And on a side note, I do remember when he left my office, and Jordan's heard the story 150 times, but, I was just still so worked up about me. He's like a god to me, right? And I turned, shake his hand, thank you for coming in. And he looks at me and he says, "You hang in there." He said, "You're going to make some money with this business." Well, as the story goes, I mean, I'm a good old Catholic. I thought the Pope had just blessed me. So I was like, I'm good. But, the confidence, he gave me a tip about how to build a business. And he gave me that little motivational encouragement there that just, man, you got to have that when you're starting a business. It's scary. And so many businesses fail. And, man, the type of person I soak up any and every bit of information and motivation I could to make it to the next day.
Yeah, for sure. And, I'm sure as a business owner, there's a ton of, highs and lows as well. You were in business 20 plus years. What are some of the, biggest wins and also some of the biggest failures that you had kind of in your journey with Interactive Solutions?
Oh gosh, I don't know. We embraced some things, I think, early on, and early adopters that, and Jordan can tell more about this as well. When I say biggest win, I mean, hey, I'm a salesman, so I'll say this. I think in 2011, we got a contract in the state of Arkansas for $8.5 million for telehealth. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
And that was just so exciting. It took us, and it was in the middle, or the tail end of the Great Recession. It was 2011. And I will brag on the fact that the guy that sold the account, millennial, and he had a team, a bunch of other guys that looked just like him on the team and everything. And in the middle of the worst recession, the worst economy in 80 years, I put all my eggs in the basket of the millennials to help me grow the business, and they did it. We went from 11 million to 25 million, from 07 to 11. Wow. But that sale was the biggest one. Biggest disappointment. How long have you got? Oh man, I don't know. It's an old story, but I had an embezzlement in my business, so I hired this lady that I thought was going to get the job done for us, and she ended up stealing $250,000 from us. And I could give you other examples, but that was certainly it was a tough time. I discovered the theft in 03, but I noticed that when the lady started stealing from me was within days after my older brother dropped dead out of nowhere. And so I was just going through a really, really hard time personally and professionally. So yeah, that was that had to be the biggest disappointment, and just it was a tough time to get through.
Yeah, for sure. And Jordan, do you kind of remember the time frame that your dad's talking about here, where he's really going through it? Like, what's it like, kind of knowing that your family business just had an embezzlement, your family member just passed away. How do you from being the son and probably being relatively young, how do you kind of support your dad and your family in times like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was just obviously a tough time all around. I very, distinctly, remember, my Uncle John's passing, and we were on a trip to Nashville when we all, found out, and it was a very shocking time. And then, fast forward when he, found out about the embezzlement, and again, he was able to, from looking at the documents, kind of figure out the timeline that she had started it, and kind of preyed on, that time, and knowing that he would be, distracted. But I will always give credit to my dad on this, and this was with the business in general, but specifically in this moment was the day that he discovered the embezzlement. I'd recently got my Eagle Scout award, and they had an Eagle Scout day where you got to shadow different people, and this is when I thought I was going to be in broadcasting, so I shadowed a news anchor for the day, and they had a reception at the end of the day, and my dad had just found out that his company had $250,000 embezzled, and he was at that reception that night. He still showed up. He showed up for he never missed, any swim meet or big camping trip or any kind of big event in my life or my sister's life, even during the tough times of the business, and as, he was building up the business and all of that. So, for me, I'll always remember that he was, still there even in that extremely, trying moment. And, as things, still would get busy throughout the business, maybe not as in dramatic a fashion, but still, you always hear the stories of these entrepreneurs, and they're gone and away from their families for such a long time. And you can certainly do that. And there's certainly choices that he made in terms of how he wanted to grow the business and how big the business could be if he did do that, versus kind of more of the lifestyle he wanted to live and the, family he wanted us to be able to grow. So yeah, I definitely always remember that, and in that specific moment that he was still there. It was definitely, we were all concerned, that we, my sister and my mom obviously had all the discussions of, is dad going to, lose the business? Are we going to be okay? All those kind of questions.
Sure.
True to form, he made the tough calls in terms of, deciding to prosecute, which a lot of times people don't in small businesses, shockingly enough. There's a lot of mixed reasons for it. Just the costs associated with doing that, and that where it kind of balances out whether you're actually going to, get any money back. And then obviously the embarrassment factor, letting people know that you had this kind of issue with your business. That's not, as much as my dad loves publicity, that's maybe not the publicity he would normally want. And so, he had to make that tough call as well. And I remember that, and it was a big part of the decision, process. But part of it was that he, didn't morally think it was right to just let it go on, because she could easily go and do this to someone else, which she had done before us and actually did after us as well.
Wow.
And also just knew that it was part of who he is and what he was, stands for, to kind of, take a moral stand on it. So, I was very proud of him in that moment and how he kind of handled it.
That's great. And Jay, kind of how do you balance that in terms of, a work life, family life balance, where, to Jordan's point, on one hand, you have this business that, just suffered an embezzlement of $250,000, and you need to figure out, are we going to be okay? How am I going to get this back? We need to grow this business to X number in order to, continue profitability. But then on the other hand, you're there for Jordan's Eagle Scout, or you're there for a camping trip or sports or whatever. How do you kind of, balance that in life?
Well, I think it's all about priorities. I started the business because I needed to have a job. I mean, and then, as time went on, you kind of look at things and some of the things that you have to do to kind of get it going and get it moving. But I always, from day one, I made a commitment to myself and to my family that, I want to be successful. There's no question about that. And I'm a pretty competitive guy and all those kind of things, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice my family to be successful. I just wasn't going to do that. And, I'm also an Eagle Scout. When Jordan got his award, I couldn't have been prouder of him. And I wanted to, and I was going to be there. There was no question about that. The other part of it, Justin, from a practical standpoint, for any entrepreneur out there or small business owners that might be listening to this podcast, one of my pieces of advice is, you go in business, don't be a martyr. Don't weigh it, like you're, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Reach out and find the resources to help you. Because it's not a one-man band kind of thing that you're going to be able to succeed. In fact, most people that try to do that either are burned out or they go out of business. So, man, early on, whether it be the founder of Holiday Inns to pick his brain about advice, or the embezzlement. I had a friend that was Secret Service that helped me get the prosecution done.
Oh, wow.
And through the years, all kinds of other people, not so much the drama and everything, but just day to day. Hey, man, how do you handle this? How do you handle that? And I think if you're willing to, be a sponge and have, be receptive to advice, don't be so full of pride or, stubborn or, in my opinion, stupid, that you don't, if somebody's been there and done that. And, to this day, Justin, I still do that. And even on post-ISI life, I'm still trying to figure things out. And I've got a kind of an informal, call them a board of directors, if you will, of people I confide in and ask, things and people that have been successful, older folks that have been in all kinds of other businesses. One guy that I reach out to a lot, he ran a trucking business. But very successful, but he has some very practical advice. And so, that's the thing. And I wanted to have a lifestyle company, to Jordan's point. I didn't want to have, me living at the office. I mean, it was never in the game plan. And putting in a gazillion hours, I'm a terrible morning person. I mean, I don't even like getting to people like, you get in the office real early? Not me, man. But I would stay late. I'd put in the effort, but I just wasn't willing to sacrifice my family. At all. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jordan, I mean, to have someone like that in your life where they are prioritizing family time, that's a gift for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely, you're certainly lucky to have.
Yeah, and point of clarification too for those maybe not know about the Secret Servicing. So yes, he was president CEO of the company, but he's not that president. So maybe people don't know that the Secret Service at the time and in its founding was part of the Department of Treasury. So part of what actually is under their other duties that we all know about. One thing is that they investigate check fraud, and so that's why they got involved in terms of and we all didn't know that until unfortunately we had to go through an embezzlement. And he again had to have a family friend who handled the office for the Secret Service in Memphis, but. So we had to learn, unfortunately, a lot about the law enforcement processes, and one of those weird things that, the Secret Service looks into check fraud, because that was one of the multiple ways that she sold money from the business, and among many other creative ways she was doing it, giving herself bonuses and all sorts of fun stuff. But so I'm definitely fortunate that my dad always made a point of kind of prioritizing the family, and that was the reason for the business was to obviously support us. So grateful for that.
So Jordan, what makes you want to stay kind of within the same industry, right? It seems like you grew up in it. You said earlier that you thought maybe you wanted to get into broadcasting, but here you are. You're one of the excellent salespeople that we have. What keeps your passion for this going, and kind of what keeps you wanting to stay in technology?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, funny enough, I originally didn't want to do anything with the family business, didn't want to do anything with the industry. That's why I went originally journalism degree. I, made a circle around Memphis, said I want to be anywhere outside this circle, right? And that's why I ended up in Chicago, as opposed to anywhere in the South for college. But I guess it's kind of like the mob. They kind of keep pulling you back in type thing, right? And to be fair, my dad never put pressure on me about it. The family didn't, but it was more my interest kind of started aligning that way. Post undergrad, I had an opportunity to work for the school and could get a grad degree for free. I immediately wanted to get an MBA with a focus on entrepreneurship. And started just kind of going down that path, and then post the MBA, started working for an IT consulting firm, and then eventually made the leap to working for ISI at that point remotely, and so I was in a sales role for ISI from Chicago, and had some good wins up here, like with Loyola University and some other schools and companies. But at that point it was, okay, if we're really going to do this thing, if I'm really going to get involved, it was kind of make or break time. So that's when we made the decision that my wife and I would move down to Memphis. And yeah, at the time, a big part of it was my interest in the technology was already there. I'd done some work, again, obviously for a technology company, actually another one as well, that did some software for your mobile devices as well. So my interest was already there. My interest in kind of the entrepreneurship business side was already there. And so it just kind of seemed like so many of the, stars would align with it. I obviously had kind of the lineage and having been involved with it from the kind of ground up. And so I kind of made that call. And obviously it had heard the stories of, the old Tamberg days. And I remember fondly, my mom and dad made a trip to Norway, came back with a Viking hat that they brought me from their trip to Oslo. Just thought it was really, cool. And it was, he really, had a great relationship with that team. And, just had a really, fond memories of that. And kind of the technology was something, again, that I'd grown up with. So it was very natural for me. Video conferencing and things like that was not something that was very foreign. The idea of working remote, which is, so ubiquitous now, but was still foreign a year and a half ago to all of us, was not for me. I worked remotely for a solid year and a half prior with ISI. And so I think just my interest in the technology aligned. And again, my interest in kind of business and everything else just aligned well with kind of what I was wanting to do. My dad was really gracious about, giving me the opportunity and kind of the leeway to come in and make my impact and, help enhance what we were doing. And that again gave me kind of opportunities to try different things. And, like I said, I'm very grateful for that. And, we were able to do some really cool things that again aligned well with my interests that were there. So I think it was a combination of the technology piece already was of interest, and then the business and entrepreneurship piece. Maybe it's hereditary, who knows? But that was something that was interest to me. And then, funny enough, as I was looking to continue my journey, post ISI and post AVISPL, the opportunity with Pexip came up, and it seemed fairly serendipitous. So it kind of worked out.
For sure. I mean, kind of again growing up in the business and seeing everything from how a technology company and how a partner can solve issues for a customer from, pre-sale to post-sale installation support, et cetera. For you, I mean, seeing all of that in your life, I'm sure that makes you, automatically excellent at relating to customer issues and being able to kind of go in and say, hey, this is what we can do to help you. This is what a solution might look like. So for you, having all that experience growing up is probably a huge plus. You did touch on something that I am always curious to hear about, just because I'm relatively new to Pexip. I've been here almost a year, but you hear about the Tamberg days, like it's like this legendary thing, and a lot of the folks that are here are those same people, those Tamberg people, and it sounds like they can really they know how to show people a great time. So. Jordan mentioned that you and your wife went over to Norway. You came back with a Viking hat. Can you talk about kind of, what those people were like, what the experience was like? I'm hoping that, sometime soon I'll get to go to Norway, but I haven't been yet.
Yeah, no, it was the first time my wife and I had been to Europe, so it was just kind of a special experience just by itself, okay? And being invited over there meant a lot. We're a startup business. I mean, at that point, we've been in business about 3 years, I think, or something, not even or barely. And it just, the thing I always think about Norway is just the feeling we had over there. It's just the country itself, it's not a huge country, but very peaceful. I just thought, a lot of the ways that they approach the technology, honestly, in those days, just very hip and cool. But just good people. And I remember, how cordial they were to my wife and I, that, in the whole hosting of the trip and everything. And then got introduced to some of the fine dining of Norway, like my first, and I think maybe only time of having reindeer for dinner. And my wife is still grossed out about, but I enjoyed it. And then the after dinner drink that's a little bit powerful. Jordan, what is it called?
Aquavit.
Aquavit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was yeah, I can't even say it here all these years later, so I must have been stumbling through that one. But just the cordial, warming, and working together. It was so much fun to be over there. We went through Norway in a nutshell. This little tour that we took in a boat and through the mountains, and I remember a guy turning to us on the boat and said, if you didn't believe in God before you started this trip, you do now. And it was inspiring. I don't know, just real awestruck the whole time. But from the business end of it, it was just kind of fun and exciting to be alongside, your manufacturer who had these hip and cool products that they wanted to grow your business, and work together. It's a real partnership. And, we outlined some things there on that trip to Norway that we wanted to really, with the business headquartered in Memphis, and we've got a lot of rural areas around us, that we really wanted to capitalize on. Actually, my background prior to starting ISI, which this telecom company, we did a lot of this, as I mentioned earlier, this VTEL equipment in schools and distance learning. So when one of my missions, besides enjoying the wonderful trip to Norway, was also to meet with the president of Tandberg and Per Hogstead to talk about distance learning and the opportunity. And I will pat our guys on the back. It's been a long time ago, but I still have to tell this story, is that based on that meeting, Tandberg recognized that they had a packaged distance learning system that was, great, but we had already put in all this equipment with this other company and all these colleges and universities. And we said, hey, what if we can create kind of like a little customized package and go back in those schools and sell them Tandberg codecs and all this other stuff? And they called it the TAM, Tandberg Auxiliary Module. So it was about half the price of this package system. And Justin, I'll tell you what, you can ask any of the old Tandberg people. We went in there with that and mowed them down. I mean, mowed them down. We sold millions of dollars with these TAM modules, and the schools appreciated it because we came in and were able to utilize existing equipment, monitors, and some other things here. But then they had the cool new codec and everything that Tandberg provided. And it just was fun. It was working together and growing together. And, the people, what I really also admired about Tandberg was the fact that nobody was sitting on a pedestal, like you could call the president. I could talk to the CEO or whoever. They were very approachable in those days.
Yeah, and it's still kind of the same, which is great. I mean, it's very possible to get a text from the president of Pexip Americas at midnight, asking kind of what's going on. It's still the same. The organization is pretty flat, and it's nice to have access to everybody and be able to collaborate with people. The culture here is certainly second to none, and that kind of leads me to another question that I had for both of you is, in running a business, how many employees did you all have? Kind of about like 50, 60 employees, something like that?
I think at the time we sold about 55 or so. We had gotten it up a little over 60, and then we had that was in the big year, 2011, 12, that kind of thing. We had to kind of dial it back a little bit. But, about the median number was about 55 or so, something like that.
How do you create a culture, a corporate culture, and kind of instill that in people to make sure that everyone's kind of rowing the boat in the same direction? And also, how do you do that to be able to attract the types of people that you want working for your organization?
Well, Jordan can answer that, as well. But I mean, I just, in terms of, recruiting people for the business, you look at people. I mean, number one, we were kind of like a miniature version of Tandberg. We didn't want this hierarchy and, you're the owner, president. I was a regular guy, I went on all the sales calls with people. I went on service calls. I never, I always say I was a salesman masquerading as a CEO. I mean, I just never got into that whole you're something special kind of thing. And I think people sense that. And, Justin Guy, just something goofy, but we just had a lot of fun with the employees and things. I mean, we had our times, like any business, but I think if you ask people that work there, it was just, we were like a big family. We had fun. We did all kinds of events, taking employees to the ballpark, parties and celebrations when we made it to 5 years and 10 years. And we were big on recognition and giving, not heroic stuff, well, at least the first few years, like a simple thing. But if you're 5 years with ISI, you got a nice engraved clock with your name on it and everything, and a $500 check. I heard later a lot of companies never do anything close to that. And when they celebrated 10 years, man, we went crazy. I gave one guy a European cruise with him and his wife. Another guy that did 10 years, I guess it was his was really crazy. He was a big golfer, and I got him ticket to the last day at the Masters. And all the stuff for the hotel and all the stuff along with that. So, we tried to being family, man. I mean, what one person likes, the other person, and really tried to show appreciation for them, to this day, man. And then, the other parts of it, when things were rough, we, like I said, we treat employees like family, and, your family takes care of family. And I remember, I'm almost spilling the beans here, but I'm giving a TEDx speech next month and talking about how doing employees right is part of my speech. And it's like, I remember a lady that worked for us in accounts payable, and she got, some bad news after a doctor's visit and had cancer and literally was going to be out of the office. She wasn't sure how long. And we had a decision to make about how we're going to treat our own employee who had been with me a while, so she had a lot invested in everything like that. And I'm not saying this for anybody, your listeners to get impressed, oh, he's such a great guy. That's not even my point. You treat your employees like you want to treat your own family, right? And we ended up, she had to get chemo and radiation, all those sort of things, and it was tough. But we were, we had consulted with an HR firm that supported us to get the recommendation. They told us to pay her for vacation and personal time and then cut her off. And I tossed and turned for nights and whatever over it. And then I said, I can't do that. I mean, I can't add money. This lady's going through enough. I'm not going to add money to her list of worries. So I made the decision. I said, we're going to pay her for as long as it takes. Now, candidly, it was 9 months later. Was it an expensive decision? Oh, yeah. But, I just felt like when my head hit the pillow at night, Justin, I was at peace with the decision because I want to treat people the way I would like to be treated. And that was hard. It was expensive. There's a lot of people that tell me you're out of your mind. When you do those kind of things, you open the door for other employees to take advantage of you and them. My mind couldn't go there. My mind went to, okay, we got to do the right thing here. And it may be expensive. And I may clip my wallet and the company's wallet, but it's my business. I can run it any way I want to. And this is the right thing to do.
Yeah. That's so impressive, and as the child of a person who's gone through cancer relatively recently, it's great to hear that you took care of your person, and I'm sure that she was eternally grateful to you after that and was totally to the business and always kind of treated you as part of her family and always did the right thing by you.
But I mean, Justin, I want to make sure, I don't want anybody out there listening to this go, oh, man, he's the greatest heroic gesture or something. It was nothing about heroic gesture. It was under the title of the right thing to do, period. And, sometimes you do that and you get burned. I mean, some guys out there might say, hey, man, you're really a nice guy, but I had something like that happen and I'm sure that can happen. But for us, we made it a point to try to be sensitive to what was going on in people's lives. And sometimes that got to be a little bit hard to, run a business and manage that. But I don't know. Jordan, you probably have some thoughts about that too.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, with the kind of culture that had already been built when I was coming in from management level, it was an opportunity, but it was also a challenge too, right? So I had people that again had been in the business a long time, had seen me grow up in the business, and they're wondering, what's this snot-nosed kid who maybe, their view is just what I was 10 years before or whatever it might be. And, it was, again, a challenge, but also an opportunity there to, to kind of build on that, culture and also being able to bring in, new faces. I was, was managing a lot of people that were older than me. And then I was also hiring people and had people there that were younger than me as well, and kind of bridging that gap. And, we try to, keep and maintain a lot of the same things about, being very, family oriented and everything else. At the same time, trying to bridge the gap on bringing in, new things and giving opportunities for advancement and training and things like that, that are hard to do and are expensive in a small business, candidly. So we would have to make calls on, hey, does it make sense to invest in taking these guys off the road for, 2 to 3 days to sit in a classroom to learn the latest and greatest tech, or whatever it might be. And, we did those things and, again, we were able to still, have, fun along the way. But I know for a lot of the, younger, millennials that we were recruiting at that time, and now I guess we Gen Zers you're recruiting, the culture thing is obviously paramount. For them, that's, up there with, if not more important in some cases than pay. And so, being able to be, competitive on the compensation side, but being able to show, hey, there are people that have been here 10, 15 years, and there are people that have, grown their careers here and get to work with big customers like FedEx and Nike and International Paper. That, spoke to a lot of people we were reaching out to. So that was, a big thing in terms of the culture. And, when it came to, recruiting, we, again, and that's probably why the culture was the way it was. A lot of it was, people would bring in their friends or whoever they might be. And in some cases, they didn't have a background in technology. We had one guy who was one of our most successful techs that was a line cook at the bar and grill down the street that a lot of the guys like to go to. A lot of one of our audio engineers, she was someone that I recruited out of this coding academy, and her day job was she was an admin at a marketing firm, but she was taking coding classes at night. And she wasn't taking coding classes in the type of audio programming we were doing. It was just she generally understood programming languages and how they worked. But when I talked with her, I found out her undergrad was in music and she had been a cellist. So kind of combining the idea that she understood programming, but she also had an ear for music, which that you can't teach, brought her in to learn the coding piece, which she picked up very quickly. And within less than a year, she was the de facto audio engineer anytime they were doing a conference room for the executive suite at FedEx. So anytime someone had a C-suite room that was going to get tuned, it was going to be tuned by her because it always sounded the best. And so again, you'd have to get kind of creative with it and kind of bring it in, and all those people, for the most part, better for worse, would kind of meld together and be able to work together. And again, it was kind of part of the culture that was built, from ISI. Certainly probably the biggest challenge of that was then taking a culture that had been built for over 20 years as kind of this small, scrappy startup. And then we kind of flipped the script, obviously, when the acquisition happens. And now instead of being, David versus Goliath, we are Goliath now. Yeah. And so having to kind of, play that through and be able to still have kind of the through line of who we are as our own team, but now being part of this much bigger team, was certainly a challenge, for sure.
How do you react to watching a company, Jordan, this question's for you, watching something that's been part of your life literally since you're 9 years old, and you've been working in the business, you've gone off, come back, but stayed involved in the business. Then all of a sudden, you get acquired, and then eventually you end up kind of leaving the business behind and move on to other things. How do you kind of separate yourself from that and kind of move on after the business was sold?
That's a great question. The first part, I guess you don't necessarily just kind of move on necessarily, emotionally in some ways. It's a long process, but, again, I learned a lot from it, first and foremost. So, good, the good, bad, and the ugly. I've learned a lot from the whole experience, and there's a lot of good in there, to be candid. Again, I give a lot of credit to my dad on this. We had been kind of down this path of kind of succession planning. I was going to take over as CEO. That was kind of part of the intent. We kind of wrote out a very rough plan when I was moving down there. And then we had actually created a formal plan, put pen to paper, in May or June of 2018. And that point, we had this whole thing worked out with even numbers and how I was going to buy my way into the business and all this kind of good stuff. He was very upfront when he got the call from someone with AVI-SPL about having interest in the business. And this had not been the first time he'd been approached before. And I knew that as well. So knew, hey, they're just, making calls, who knows? And they wanted to meet, and they wanted to meet at Infocom. And for anyone who knows my dad, he does not like going to Infocom. It's just not his thing. He doesn't like going, especially when it's in Vegas, which this one was. He does not like Vegas, even more so. So he was not going to go, and so I was going to go, and we were going to bring a bunch of the team as well. And so he said, "Hey, anything that happens is going to happen with you. So you go to the meeting, kind of figure out, sniff it out, and see if there's anything to it." So I go to the meeting. It's at this hotel bar, a little bit off the strip, very clandestine type thing where they didn't want it. Obviously, you're not going to meet on the show floor for something like that. Right. And I got there about 2 hours before because I'm just, I'm freaking out about the whole thing. And I just kind of scope out where the meeting's going to be. And I see who I kind of deduced were the people I was meeting with. And they're meeting with people every 30 minutes, different group comes up. So I call my daddy and I go, this is a cattle call. They're just kind of, feeling out the market for a lot of different people. I'm just going to have a conversation, be candid, and we'll go on our way. So I go and have the meeting, and I think they eventually told me they actually met with 14 different companies that day. Oh, wow. And we're the only one they moved forward with. So that conversation turned into more conversations. And, so that meeting was in May of 2018. They made us an official offer in August. And then we closed the deal on October 31st, Halloween, which, as my dad can also mention as well, was only a few days before my sister's wedding. A few days after her wedding. So it was very stressful. We actually had to sign some of the final paperwork in the hotel business center in Savannah. While we're late for the rehearsal dinner and need to get out of there, but they needed some paperwork in advance of the final closing day that was going to be several days later. Again, to answer your initial question, kind of how do you let, again, it was, he was I knew what was going on the whole time. I was very heavily involved in the discussions and the data sharing and everything else, because it's a mess with accountants and everything else. And we're pouring through the books together with them and having to explain every little dollar and every little piece of everything that's been going on for 20 years. And, from that, I knew about the acquisition piece. And then for my part, because I was going to be taking over as general manager, I also had to understand what the new world order was going to look like, what everyone's new roles would look like, what their titles would be, what the process would be from a project management streamline. We were going to go from November 1, everyone was going to be told. So at this point, my dad and I are the only ones that know. And November 1, everyone was going to be told. January 1, we were going to take on the new branding. So basically, everyone's going to have 2 months to kind of just mourn the loss of ISI at that point before we were going to take on all new shirts and all new website and be on our way. So, that Christmas party that year was definitely one where everyone was drinking pretty heavy, but it was understandable, and thankfully they were very good about wanting to maintain a lot of the team and everything else, so there wasn't this big concern there, because they bought us for our reach in the market. We filled a geographic spot for them in the Mid-South. We had the offices in Memphis and Nashville, and they wanted to expand and invest in that. And true to their word, we had not had brick and mortar in Nashville for a long time, and they actually helped us get that off the ground and having that there. And being able to invest in our people in terms of training and opportunities to work on projects all over the country. There was a lot of things to that were good. There's obviously the other parts of where you go, again, you're part of a company that's 50 to 60 people to a company that at that time had 1,400 employees. So massive change and massive, difference. So, all I could do was say, hey, I won't know every little thing. We're not going to know every little thing day one. It's going to be a process for all of us. We're all going to learn together. But end of the day, they're wanting to see us grow. Our success is their success. And this is not like an acquisition. They're buying us for some kind of widget that we have. They're buying us again for our people and for our, customers we work with. So keeping our customers happy and keeping our people happy is paramount for them to get the return on their investment. And once people kind of got around that, I think they figured out. A lot of people, there were certainly people that still struggled with it, but there was also people that really embraced it and really got into the training and resources that they provided. We even had one of our techs that worked on a job in Seattle and did such a good job, the Seattle office wanted to hire him. And he, wanted an opportunity to move to Seattle. Hey, great. Still part of the, bigger family at that point. Yeah. And that's something he would have never been able to do with us. And that was, again, for all the, challenges, it gave a lot of people a lot of opportunities to expand their careers. So I obviously learned a lot from it. Again, obviously work closely with the ABI SPL team now as they're a partner of Pexip, and we're very good relationship with them, nationally, and certainly from here in the Chicago area. So great experience, overall.
That's great. And Jay, did you kind of, once the paperwork was signed, were you retired at that point, or was there kind of a transition plan for you to start to kind of head out?
Well, first off, never use the word retire with me, Justin. That's a terrible word. I'm not retired now, and I'm
semi-retired.
I'll go with semi, but no, retire. That's just anyway. So I did. I had a contract that I was around the year after the sale. Okay. And it was awkward, honestly. I mean, I was happy to help Jordan out. I told the CEO of ABI, I said, look, man, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't work for other people. I work for me. But with my son running the business, of course, I'll do anything I can.
So then he worked for me.
But that was okay. Well, that was okay though. Yeah, and it was okay because family. Okay, I wanted to still have a Myers, in that office and running the business, and I think we both learned a lot the year after after the sale, and I think those things. There's no perfect way to do it. I don't think 20-something years of doing one thing, you can't snap your fingers and wow, it's going to be perfect. And I think that to Jordan's point, some things happened that were really good for career opportunities for people and training and, other things like benefits and stuff. But, I'm not going to lie, that was a hard year for me. I mean, I was a little out of sorts, but we got through it. And I think Jordan did a great job of just, trying to keep everything together and certainly respect the fact that he, chose to move on from there. When your father's an entrepreneur and the way he grew up in the business, I mean, it's a little hard, when you've been hearing your whole life that, your dad's not one of these big company guys. And then all of a sudden he's running a business in a big company. That's a little running counter to sort of the DNA. But, hey, did a great job, did some nice stuff. And I will brag on Jordan one thing. Okay, this is going to be the proud papa saying, but I have to say this. That sale would not have happened without him. And for a number of reasons. Number one, he was kind of the right side of my brain thinking because I tend to be a little bit more the emotional type. But the other part of it was practical stuff. Justin, all the stuff he's talking about, running around getting documents and things that ABI needed and all. Can you imagine if I'm out there looking for that? I mean, with that kind of red flag, that deal could have blown up before it ever even hardly got started. So I think it's real important. And then on top of that, because this had to go on, and this was very, very intense. The summer of 2018 was the most stressful summer, even including the embezzlement I've ever been through, because it was relentless, trying to run a business while you're trying to sell it. But it was, again, to Jordan's credit for being able to go out there and protect me from blowing the deal up because me running around getting documents. The other part, though, maybe even more important is, I don't remember the number of sales we did that year. I'm thinking it was 18, 20 million, something like that. Jordan sold over 6 to brand new accounts. And as a salesman, I will just tell you, I have huge respect for this. I love the AV industry. I really do. And I have a lot of respect for a lot of people, know a lot of folks in there. But so many of them live off of the same old accounts. They just sell the same people all the time. I'll brag on Jordan one more time. His were brand new accounts, Justin, in the middle of helping his dad sell a 20-plus-year-old business. That was as impressive of a year of somebody on all cylinders that I've ever seen. And it was vital. He kept me on the track. And then, you know what? He knew we had to keep the sales going. And honestly, some of the other guys in the team were having some rough years, and he put it in overdrive. So it was great. Challenging as all get out, but but it worked out okay.
Yeah, we thankfully had the guise of going through the succession planning as kind of our cover, if you will, for why I was asking for all these documents. Because he's right. Otherwise, it would have raised a lot of questions, and people just knew that given not only the succession planning, but also a lot of what I've been doing in the business anyways, and kind of looking harder at numbers and where we could improve, that they kind of knew that I was annoying about that stuff anyways. And so when I came asking for really obscure, do you have that purchase order from 2001? They wouldn't really question it, because they knew that I just kind of asked a lot of those types of questions. But I do appreciate that. Yeah, that was a very stressful summer. I definitely learned more in those 3 months about accounting than I did in 3 years of business school, because it was, like you said, a barrage of questions and documents and reviewing things for hours on end with them. This is obviously part of the due diligence, but again, great process to learn from. And I think if anyone ever has the opportunity to be a part of M&A, either from obviously the buying or selling side of it, I encourage them to do it, because it's an interesting process for sure. It's not, and as much as I talk about, there being the accounting involved, at the end of the day, it's, people sitting down at a table and deciding to make a deal like anything else. Right. And people make deals with people. And I think, again, there was, they liked the numbers they were seeing, but again, they liked more of the team that we had and the approach we had, and thought it synced up well with, with the AVI-SPL culture as well. So, it was a tricky few months though, for sure.
Definitely. Well, congratulations to you both. I mean, at this point, you've both certainly had, grown and sold a very successful business, and that's awesome to hear. So, appreciate it. Jay, I mentioned retirement, and I probably shouldn't have done that. But because I know you've got a bunch of stuff going on, you're an author, 3 times over, you've got a podcast going on, you're running around doing a bunch of speaking engagements, etc. Do you care to talk a little bit about your podcast and some of your books and some of the things you got going on now?
Glad you asked, Justin. I just happen to have a copy of the latest book called Rounding Third and Heading for Home. It was funny. So to talk about the books first, and I'm proud of this Rounding Third and Heading for Home, because I think as I started the first book I wrote in 2007, and the second one was 7 years later in 2014, and then here we are 7 years later with the third one. So, I don't just write books because I'm trying to be a best-selling whatever. I do it when I think I have something to say. And this book in particular, I was really trying to communicate a lot of things. I mean, a lot of things about the emotional side of selling a business, not the MBA, here's the cookie cutter, here's all the the graphs and the numbers and all that. Because I think selling a business that you started literally out of dirt, it's highly emotional, man. It's just, I can't even describe, even to this day, I think about it. But I also, I think in retrospect, was trying to not just talk about the emotions when I wrote the book, but also, how did we get here? Why would an AVI-SPL, almost $1 billion company, or over that now, would be interested in little old ISI in Memphis, Tennessee? And so when I started looking back about things and kind of lessons learned on the journey of the life cycle of the business, I started looking at like, okay, man, what is it about us? And so some of the things I'm not a journalism person, okay? I mean, I'm a marketing guy, but I like to tell stories. So through the book, that's what I did. And things like knowing your brand, so that you can communicate your brand. We were not the low-cost provider. I tell some funny stories about, accounts that we were in that thought, we were kind of like, we were a low-cost provider, like we're Walmart or something, everyday low price. And they go, no, man, it's not us. And I almost blew a $2 million deal telling the buyer that we're not Walmart, okay? But But there was other things there too, and you alluded to something about employees and the culture, and that's also part of the book and everything, treating people. So when we looked at like the whole thing, all these different lessons, it kind of, when I got through the book, I was kind of like, well, you know what, man? This kind of made sense for them to come after us. And, there's a practical side too, Justin, which is, and I would say this to your listeners out there, timing is everything if you ever want to consider selling a business. Timing is everything. Because we had just come off the second biggest year we'd ever had in the history of the company in 2017. Record profits. We had done very, very well. So that was a key ingredient. Okay, why ISI? So Jordan said one of 14 that they picked us. Also, just things that we found out after the fact is, the geography. We were located in the right place at the right time. They needed an office in Tennessee for a lot of strategic reasons. But, some of this stuff, I learned and put in the book about, and I make a big deal about this, and every time I sign somebody's book for them, I put this quote in there, but you sell a business when it's ready, not when you're ready. I'm not sure to this day, I still feel emotions about my old business. I drive past the building, I don't see anybody there, I have tears in my eyes. It still bothers me. But, you got to, when you look at the thing, it's a transaction. But unfortunately, with a family-owned business, it's personal, man. I mean, you'd like to say it otherwise. But then there's other parts of it, too. And one of the things I observed in the AV industry is how many guys just had and ladies had just this idea of the value of their business. And so one of the things I make a big deal in the book about is like, it's not what you think your business is worth. It's what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Right.
And so, so I had a lot of fun doing that and writing the other books. I do spend my time promoting that. And we've had a challenge, obviously, in a pandemic getting things done, but have some fun. And we did have an in-person event in Florida that was real successful. So that was a lot of fun. I'm also on the public speaking kind of, I guess, I don't know if circuit's a word, but I get invited to do it a fair amount and enjoyed that. In fact, I even went to my old high school, Jordan's old high school, the other day and spoke to a couple of business classes. So that's fun. What I'm really excited right now is that I'm going to be a TEDx speaker down in Louisiana in the 1st of October. And that's always been one of those career goals of mine. I've always had a lot of respect for the TED Talks. And so that's a biggie. Yeah, it's real exciting. And, honestly, Justin, in terms, and I appreciate you asking about the podcast, I've got a marketing company that's been helping me promote the latest book, and they just thought it would be a good idea to kind of keep pushing my brand out there. And honestly, I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I mean, it just kind of like, okay, I had a few questions. Some of these guys were always, like, do you spend days out there researching these people and all that? And I go, no, not really. And I Google their name, look up a few. I didn't not do any research, but I didn't get crazy over it. But really proud of the way it came out. We had 12 episodes, and everybody, you picked up on the one with my wife and I did one, which I think was really a lot of fun. But boy, I'll tell you what, some other ones, if you got some baseball fans out there, there was a really very compelling interview I did with a guy named Jim Leyritz, who used to be a star player for the Yankees. And boy, some of that stuff was so personal that I really, I got choked up listening to my own questions, and he did too. And that was really a lot of fun and very compelling. And then, gosh, I tell you what, I ask your listeners to listen to the one with the CIO of FedEx, Rob Carter. Man, if you don't come away, there's a reason why this guy's got this big job. I mean, just the way his mind works, and such a wonderful man. And he's actually the first person I told about the sale of my business. So that was a real special podcast interview. But, just a lot of fun, just trying to, at this stage of my career, just kind of still push helping people that want to start businesses, that want to have insights about what made us successful and got us to the point that, we're able to do what we were able to do. And, that's it's keeping me busy and it's keeping me out of trouble. So far, so good.
That you forgot to mention you're also helping out the University of Memphis as well.
Yeah, that's right. So I've got a role as they got a big title called the Executive in Residence. Essentially, I'm just over there kind of helping out the business department. I got an office and a parking pass and no check, but that's another story. But anyway, I do. It's volunteer, but I enjoy it. It's fun. I mean, I'm very loyal to my old school and everything, and been going out and doing presentations to the students out there for I don't know how many years, 10 or 15 at least. University of Memphis has really got a lot of good things going on, and so I currently teach a public speaking class, and boy, I'll tell you, they're really jazzed up about me doing this TEDx speech. Oh, by the way, they're just like going nuts because it's credibility. But I also helped start up. What's amazing, Justin, is how many people that are actually younger than you and Jordan that are wanting to start businesses and looking. And I admire them. They're reaching out to people like me. And how did you get this done? And so on. So I've mentored and counseled with dozens of students out there, and it's exciting. I really enjoy working with the younger folks and trying to help them.
For sure. And I actually wanted to ask you that, Jay, just kind of to wrap things up here. Well, first of all, I will say you've certainly made a fan out of me on the podcast. I've listened to every episode, and it's been great. I actually listened to them all kind of in a row, starting with the one with your wife, and then I kind of backtracked. I think that was like episode 10 or something. Backtracked to the first one and listened to them all on my way home from Savannah back to Philadelphia about a month and a half ago. And that's when I was like, yeah, we need to have Jay and Jordan on to kind of talk about this story. But we'll definitely link the podcast when we put this out. This will be out probably the end of next month. We'll also do a link to all three of your books. If you are interested in listening to a book on audio and you like the way Jordan's voice sounds, then you'll be able to hear Jordan read you the words from the book. Jordan did kind of the audio overview on one of the books. So there's that.
Yeah, the omni-channel approach there. So, I don't, I'm not an author, but I am a narrator. So yeah, if you enjoy what you're hearing now, here you go.
Justin, I will brag on Jordan about that because I kind of twisted his arm the first time, and he was so good. My publisher said, gosh, will he can we do voiceovers with him and, kind of like contracted. Jordan's like, I got a day job, man. I mean, but then we did it's funny. We did the first book. It was actually his second narration. So we kind of had in reverse order. So, but I think just a fabulous job. He's, very skilled with that. And I wasn't going to read my own book. That's just creepy to me. So I just said, wait, but I thought it was really, really good because, a lot of this stuff in those first two books is very personal, very family kind of stuff. And it was really, really well done. So I think your listeners enjoy those books. They're really good. They're both on Audible, by the way. And I guess some other things, other ways to get it as well.
Definitely. Yeah. And like I said, we'll link those up when we come out with this on LinkedIn here, probably next month. But just kind of to wrap things up, if you could just give us maybe one thing that for young entrepreneurs that are maybe looking to branch out and start their own business, just one kind of closing piece of advice.
Well, I think that you got to go out and do your homework, create a business plan and put your heart and soul into it. Because you lay out a good plan, you got a chance to succeed. And I guess my other little tip is, at least for me, you can't ever give up. Once you got that plan together, you stay committed. You just don't give up, no matter what happens. Yeah,
and that's great advice. And I mean, you get a lot of people, especially on social media out there now, from these people who have absolutely no accreditation, talking to people about, hey, this is how you start a business. This is how you motivate yourself to do that. Definitely take it from Jay and from Jordan. These guys have been there. They built a large business and sold it to a massive company. So they've had a ton of success. But we appreciate you both jumping on. It's been a great conversation where, again, I'm super stoked that you guys were able to.
Yeah, appreciate it, Justin. Let me just add one little thing here to that tip. I mean, now I'm going to give you 3, I guess, and you asked for 1, so sorry about that. But
keep it with the baseball theme. 3 strikes.
Third. No, that's right. Yeah. So then we're going to whiff or something here. But I would encourage for all the young entrepreneurs. There's all these stories about people that create these businesses, and Jordan and I are involved in some investment side of some things, and this hyper growth kind of stuff. This is my advice, being almost 65 years old, been 20-something years in business, everything. Don't start a business to make a lot of money. Start a business for the pride of growing something and building something out of nothing. That's going to carry you a whole lot further. I never focused on money with ISI. I swear I didn't. I've had the pride of building something out of nothing. And if the money happens after the fact, wonderful. But I think that's probably the best advice I could give of all the stuff I've just said is don't do it for the money, man. Do it for the pride that you're going to feel in building something. And that's better than anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Jay.
Appreciate it, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Jordan, thank you, man. We appreciate you guys.
You got it.